Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again with another new build, and this time around we are doing some self-cast action with Arc and Wave of Conviction. Though pretty much exclusively the clips are going to be about Arc, because the idea around this build was to use the triple damage staff that came from Searing Exarch and started being usable last league, and I completely ignored it up till now. The idea was to use triple damage staff and have a good clear setup and a single target setup. The clear setup being the arc that you are seeing on the screen and Val arc incorporated as well, and then a single target setup in Wave of Conviction, which I'm hoping, or was hoping, would be a nice kind of weapon swap and do a bajillion damage with it. So far in the end, Arc is doing something like 5 million DPS, and it's really good for clear once you've got everything kind of figured out and got its good cast speed and some thickness and all that into your character and a lot of crit and all that. It still really clears super nice. And then Wave of Conviction itself has something like 15 to 20 million DPS at the moment, pending potentially even more. So the idea was hopefully to kind of kill stuff self-cast, but so far what we've made here is a pretty nice mapper and something I'm fairly satisfied with for self-casting and just clearing and stuff. It's been pretty damn fun, and we'll see where it goes from here. So Arc itself definitely is not dead, and this actual skill template, or this template for the build, is really nice to test a lot of skills in, because it's very generic as a build. So it's using the triple damage staff, which then reduces your resist, so it's pretty tough to gear in the end just because you got to get a lot of resists, and it's also why I'm running Purity of Elements, where I rarely would otherwise be doing so, and otherwise a lot of my damage is just increased spell, increased elemental sort of thing, and you can put whatever skill you want in and kind of test all kinds of things out. So for the most part, just playing Arc, but if you want to copy something like this, you can definitely try out many other different skills too. And I will try a few others out before I take on endgame, but I think Wave of Conviction should be what's going to hit about as hard as humanly possible, though the biggest problem with that is that you do become pretty melee, because you really have to come up close and personal to cast Wave of Conviction continuously. So there really isn't too much to mention. It's an Inquisitor, pretty basic stuff, crit and crit damage, and it feels really good being an Inquisitor right now for all the regens and kind of the thickness you can have, and as well as that, ignoring elemental resistances, since Arch Nemesis has plenty of that, and then lots of altars you click can have plenty of that, and Sentinels just, can make things quite a bit thicker, and as always, are basically the thickest part of every map. The first little bit when you pop your Sentinel is pretty insane, but after that, then things just start falling over rather smoothly. And throughout the video, I do try out several Herald of Ice MTXs, so that's why things look a bit different. We used Automaton, Gloom, and Celestial throughout the video, but lots of them are really good, so I don't know, can't really lose. Other than that, what else did I want to say about the Inquisitor sort of action? It was also trying to utilize timeless dual technology, which isn't going to be super accessible, or you're not really even going to ever copy exactly what I did, because it is going to be a bit RNG, and I'll go over that in a sec once we go over the character's gear. But the idea was to try and use a Elegant Hubris to change a bunch of passives and then get some minion damage, so that the minion damage with Spiritual Aid scales all of my damage, and then I can also use Herald of Ice for additional clear, because minion damage is going to become like generic damage, which also scales your Herald of Ice. So that's kind of how I was trying to do clear with Arc. So Arc, Chains, Herald of Ice. In the end, it hasn't really worked out that well for that, because you don't have any area on this current setup, and that means that Herald of Ice just doesn't really chain that well. But that said, you definitely could do that if you wanted, but for the most part it's just Arc doing its thing, and it is pretty good to see Arc still well capable of killing things, and I think just about every spell should be able to. Like I said, you should be able to test a lot of stuff in this sort of a setup. Triple damage stuff, can't really go wrong, and then huge self-cast buffs last league, so I think just about everything can be done self-cast. at least up to a certain point. I doubt you're going to be enjoying too many Ubers currently with a lot of skills, but that doesn't really matter. Who gives a shit about the Ubers for most content in any case. So we've only really done one piece of single target just for a test by the end of the last stream, which was just this here with Wave of Conviction. So it's still a work in progress, but currently, yeah, it's looking like we should be blowing up these types of guardians and shit, and maybe still taking on some of the bigger bosses. So I have to wait and see on that one, but for now, pretty good. Let me rip into how I've built the character thus far. So here is the current character level 91 Inquisitor called 5-star build. Some Diablo Immortal joke, 5 stars, you know, dual, whatever. Who gives a shit? And it is based around the triple damage staff. So they were popping off last league, going pretty well, but you know, to cover the negative resists, it really seemed to synergize hard with like Omniscience, but they're quite a lot more expensive this league, so it's a bit tougher to fix up resists without something busted like that. But it's honestly not that big a deal. You just got to put a bit more emphasis and priority on resists in some gear slots, and then yeah, it actually still works out. I was surprised that I could get away with a few of my gear choices given the difficulty in resists, but it is definitely a bit annoying, or a bit more than usual. So the 60 reduced elemental also reduces the negatives, so it means you start out at a certain more amount, and also it means you can't really like combo it with Dorani's prototype because it's really hard to get higher into the negatives because of that, etc. If that all makes sense. So it only does the elemental resistances as well, so your chaos starts out at the normal amount, and getting a little bit of extra chaos still helps out. So aside from that, I'm running Purity of Elements, and then Determination, Zealotry, and I'm using Herald of Ice, mostly just for the clear. It's a little bit of extra damage, but you really don't have to do it if you don't want to. In this type of a setup, it's just kind of aesthetic and a little bit of extra clear. So for Arc itself, the setup that I've got running here is Anomalous Arc, so it just gives it a little bit of extra chain range. It's honestly not important. I just bought one and leveled it up and then Valed it at level 20. Double Valed, that is, from the gem room, and hit Val. So it's pretty important that you get Val Arc, honestly. I played without Val Arc up until level 90. With Arc, and it's fine. It's like okay, but Val Arc is an absolute game changer for clear and overall enjoyment, and then also helps you single target out while you're just using Arc. So you owe it to yourself to get a Val Arc as soon as possible. It feels so much better than not having one. Just mass amounts of clear, and just a very satisfying button to press. So aside from that, we then got crit damage, faster casting, spell echo with extra cast speed, added lightning at level 5, and crit strikes. It's pretty important to get your crit up fairly high because you really want to be basically making sure you are critting and doing all of your good damage on every cast and every big chain. So that's why I'm basically capping out crit here with the crit strike support, even though I've got a lot of crit already. So I've got a chest that I just used a woke orb on for increased effect of auras, and then spell crit, because I find the spell crit's probably still worth doing. It's got terrible prefixes at the moment, so ideally we're going to, you know, have just a life roll and then percent life as energy shield, because currently my energy shield is only 810, and that is pretty small. Especially while we're using Eldritch Battery with Mind Over Matter. So Eldritch Battery just lets you cast infinitely on your mana, and with this MTX for the Devouring Diadem from the Battle Pass, it makes your energy shield look a little bit fancier as well. But the idea is to get a bit more energy shield so that Mind Over Matter, when combined with that, actually does some more shit, because currently 30% of damage taken for life goes to the energy shield. It's not huge compared to my life at the moment. The Devouring Diadem does let you fit in a bunch of auras, so we've got Determination, Enlighten level 3, just for a bit more reservation, Zealotry, and Purity of Elements, Anomalous, which gives me like an extra resist or some shit. And then you will have a Blessing of some sort happening in the boots. Currently I haven't put anything there, but it's going to be Hatred for the weapon swap that is for Wave of Conviction. So that's the idea around that. I've hardly used Wave of Conviction yet, just for that one little boss test. But the idea is to then have this for single target, because Arc at its maximum is going to deal like 8 million single target if I really went hard with it, whereas Wave of Conviction can go up to like 20-ish. So it's just going to be much, much stronger for a single target. And that currently just has Woke Added Fire, Conk Effect, a worse version of Echo, Added Lightning, but going to use the Woke Added Lightning, and then Intensify. So that's kind of the idea around the build. And then the rest of the gear is, a bit whatever. So we're using Call of Void again, which is really nice just for shattering everything. And also we do Max Chill, so it does provide a defensive boost. Mark of the Shaper, which gives you both benefits when you're using a ring that has both influences, so spell damage and cannot be stunned. Otherwise, just a fuck ton of extra damage, because basically with this item, it has nothing on it except for triple damage. So your thought process around building around this should be, how do I get percent damage in the build and some cast speed, crit multi, all of that. And something like this is a really good option. But my entire plan was to kind of go with a Elegant Hubris Jewel, which converts a bunch of your notables into other things, and then take a bunch of damage from that by using a Impossible Escape with Necromantic Aegis. So this is probably the best slot in the tree for combining a Elegant Hubris, because there's 7 or 8 passives here, can't remember, I think it's 8, that you can potentially get that just are worth a lot to the build. So in this case, I end up getting minion damage 80%, minion damage 80%, and then this one over here is minion damage 80%. So if we spec into Singularity, Spiritual Aid, sorry, you then get 240% damage, and that will apply to all kinds of damage. So it's not just spell, not just elemental, it's all your damage. And then we have critical multi here and max life here. So that's the best one, generic one that I thought I could get. I spent like 100, 200 divines just trying to see if I can get any cool shit. And I can show you what I actually end up coming up with. So a lot of these, the best ones that I picked out for my build in the end, could very easily be used for this build, but I ended up just slotting in this one for the most convenient sort of action. But some of these have much better crits, some of them have much better resists. I was keeping them just in case I needed a lot more resists in the build, because I wasn't quite sure how it was to build around the staff. Some have some more armor and all kinds of shit. So not entirely sure this is the best one to use, but currently it's the one I've landed on. So yeah, it's pretty fun to just divine one over here. If you're using like a Scion, it can be a lot, more point efficient. And there's definitely lots of good slots that you can put Elegant Hubrises. It's just a bit more complicated. Whereas with this, Impossible Escape over here, and then hopefully get some good shit. So ideally, they can do some really big things. Currently, I'm, maybe using like half of it, and I was also going to potentially go 2 points to here. You can potentially go like 3 points to here, another 3 there. So, if it's worth it, 5 points for this entire wheel. So yeah, there's some very interesting shit that can be happening in this area. And currently, like I said, minion damage and life. If you don't have this, basically you don't spec all these points and you're saving like, I don't know, 10, 15 points or some shit. And you can instead just get some early damage and a bit of cast speed and life and shit. And I've had a look at it, and it's honestly only a little bit better at the moment to be doing this. But it was an idea I wanted to go with, and currently, yeah, it's working out okay. The rest of the passive tree is basically getting some reservations, some staff nodes, and getting a bit thicker and all that. So crit and some staff nodes and spell block, and with glancing blow at the moment, I'm almost capped on both attack and spell block. And then, of course, with this, we are ailment immune. Determination gets us a decent bit of thickness. So with flasks up and then molten shell, I mean, we can take some actual hits and got some good regen right now. The idea for the build in the end was to also run righteous fire, so at the moment just some good regen, but no righteous fire yet. Then grabbed some focus gloves that had the veiled focus, and then some sort of temple gloves, and mashed them together thanks to recombinators, and that's what we've got here. A belt that I've reused from another character, still pretty basic, and then recombinated an amulet with extra cold and crit multi, and then like extra lightning and crit multi, some shit like that, and ended up making this guy. So the idea was just to have a big extra fizzes element for my Wave of Conviction. Not very good for the arc setup, but doesn't really matter because the idea was to focus on the Wave of Conviction setup. But for the most part, Arc is doing all of the heavy lifting in this build at the moment and all of the clear, and eventually, hopefully, Wave of Conviction will be doing all of our single target. As well as that, I've also got a Stormbrand setup in my chest at the moment, which just has these links, but in the end, when I min-max the links, Stormbrand should be adding something like 5 to 10 million additional damage of its own in this build, because it's built pretty generically, and all we had to do is take Rune Binder for an extra brand on the enemy, and then just set it up occasionally on some bosses and heavier targets, and you got extra big passive damage happening from Stormbrand. Otherwise, I was thinking of Orb of Storms, but I think this performs just a little bit better. In any case, that's currently the build. So yeah, it's a bit tough to figure out resist, but once you get there, it's all good, and this stuff feels pretty good. Do definitely want to fix some cast speed throughout the tree, so I've got a bit of cast speed happening from the Watcher's Eye, cast speed Zealotry, and then Arcane Surge Zealotry, because we can't get Arcane Surge while wearing Devouring Diadem otherwise. So this thing was like 1x, but you know, is what it is. And then just, yeah, Jewels with a bit of extra crit multi, but that's because I ended up kind of fixing my cast speed. You can just get triple cast speed Jewels instead if you'd rather. But yeah, that's it. Been going very well. You can test out many other skills. I'll give you an endgame report on the next video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.